Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. If you're a regular listener to the show, welcome back. It's great to have you with us again. If you're a first-time listener to the show, I'm glad you found us. Stick around, there's plenty of great things to listen to today. Imagine traveling across the world as a teenager to take care of some kids that belong to someone else. Yes, today we are going to be talking to someone who is an au pair. So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show today to Leslie Rose Petersen. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How are you going today?
I am doing very well. How about yourself?
Well, I'm doing really well. I'm going to tell all the listeners what you told me before we started recording. You said to me that you were having a very boring day so far today.
Yes, so far. It wasn't very exciting just because I haven't really been out and about exploring Sydney at all today. So just kind of a chill and relaxing Sunday.
Well, I promised you that I would try and liven it up a little bit, so I put a bit of pressure on myself now to deliver on that.
Stakes are high.
Stakes are high, yeah. So tell me, is this your first time on a podcast show?
Yes, it is. I've never done anything like this before.
Oh, great. I love getting first timers. I promise to be very gentle on you, okay?
Good. Thank
goodness. I won't give you anything too crazy to think about. It's quite funny because people always send me a note before the show and say, oh, is there any questions that you want to send me to prepare? And I say, no, I don't want you to prepare anything. I want to be as spontaneous as we possibly can.
Not going to lie, I was nervous about that, but we'll power through.
I'm sure we will. Now, listen, what I do is I always offer for my guests to actually dedicate the show to someone special in their lives because I think it's a good memory to have. And I'm going to ask you to dedicate the show to someone special in your life. So who would you like to dedicate the show to today?
I would like to dedicate it to my family back home in Wisconsin in the United States. Without them, I definitely wouldn't have this experience that I'm having.
Fantastic. So it's to your family. So can you give us some names of the people that we're talking to?
We have my mom, Carolyn Petersen, my dad, David Petersen, and my brother, Luke Petersen.
Karen, David, and Luke. This is for you from your daughter all the way in Sydney, Australia today. Special dedication. There we go. Now, we've already covered two things. We've covered the fact that you're in Sydney, Australia today, and we've covered the fact that you're from Wisconsin. Tell us a little bit about the place you're from in Wisconsin, USA, because a lot of people probably have never heard of it before.
Yeah, so Wisconsin is the part of the Midwest in the United States. Where I'm from northwestern Wisconsin, so a lot colder than you would think. But I grew up in a really small town of only about 1,000 people and had only graduated with 54 people in my grade. So very small compared to some schools that you hear of. So it definitely had a different atmosphere growing up, but it was just something I've always loved, knowing everyone.
What's the name of this small town that you're from?
It's called Balsam Lake.
Oh.
So very small. But we have a gorgeous lake that we have a lot of Minnesotans that come over, and they have cabins on the lake. So it's kind of a small touristy town in the summertime. So.
Well, I'm going to blow you away a little bit today because in researching you and where you were from, I found out that we have a few things in common. And,
oh, no.
First of all, for all the people listening today, if you are not too sure of your geography of the United States of America, we're talking about a very small town that's north of Minneapolis. And if you were to go from Minneapolis up to a place called Duluth, you would probably take a turn off and head inland towards Balsam Lake, if I'm right.
Yes.
And I wanted to tell you today that I've actually been to Half Moon Lake, which is very, very close to your home.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
It's about 15 years ago, but I had, I was on a trip up in that area and doing a lot of sightseeing with a friend of mine who actually lived north up past Minneapolis actually, and I went to both Bone Lake and Half Moon Lake, and it's
Oh,
extraordinary that I've
wow.
got you on the show today from that area of the world,
Yeah.
isn't it? So
Those lakes are literally about 5 minutes from my house, so it's very close.
there we go. There we go.
That's
Extraordinary.
so cool.
So look, you're from a very small town in the United States,
Yes.
and you're now in a city in Australia that has over 5 million people. How's that come about? How did that all happen for you?
Well, growing up in this small town, you kind of need to explore a little bit and see the world. So I kind of got bit with the travel bug about 2 years ago when I was at university. I studied abroad in Europe,
Mm,
and we went to 7 different countries: Germany, Austria, Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Italy. And that's kind of where I got bit by the bug. And I don't know, Australia was just kind of a place I've always wanted to go. And I actually just graduated
mm.
from university in May. So it's kind of the right time of my life to do some traveling, see what's out in the world, get out of the small town for a little bit.
So tell us about. I'm always fascinated when people leave their home country for the first time and they have that first overseas travel experience. Tell us about that first trip that you went on to Europe and how that was for you, being, I guess, amazed by all those new cultures for the first time. Yeah.
Yes, it was amazing because we flew right in from Minnesota into Germany.
Mm.
So a little bit different of a culture there, and I definitely experienced culture shock. The language barrier was hard at first, but the longer you're there, you definitely start to adapt and learn phrases and what works. So that was really cool.
Mm.
But there's so many little things you don't think about. Like back in the States, if we need something, we go to Walmart, which is just, has everything you could possibly need. Whereas in Germany and these other countries, you had to go to like 5 different stores to get your things. And it was just very different experience. But I absolutely loved my time in Europe because a lot of the people from Europe kind of settled in the Midwest area, so it's very, very similar in certain ways with the food and things like that.
Mm.
So it wasn't too shocking, but at the same time, I definitely knew I was not in Wisconsin anymore.
What time of the year did you travel to Europe?
In June, so it was very hot,
Mm.
but it was gorgeous.
Yeah, summertime's the best time to be in Europe, I think, that's for sure.
Yeah, they had told us that it was usually cold to start off with, but it was actually like a record heat when we were there. So we were just sweating
Mm.
every day, all day.
Mm. You,
But it was still good.
so other than Germany, where else did you go to?
Austria, Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia,
Brilliant. So
and Italy as well.
fantastic countries on that list.
Yes.
What were a couple of your favorites there?
So I'm a little biased because I actually celebrated my 21st birthday in Prague.
Ah,
So Prague kind of has a little bit of my heart because of that. But I also really liked Italy. We went to a village called Cinque Terre.
Cinque Terre, a fantastic place.
Yes, it's so gorgeous. It was so relaxing.
Mhm.
That was like the end of our travels, so we just kind of hung out and went swimming, ate some pasta. It was really relaxing.
I've got to ask you a couple of questions about those two places that you just mentioned. Did you get the mandatory selfie photo on the Charles Bridge in Prague?
Yes, yes, I did.
Along with about 1 million other tourists, probably.
Oh, yes, of course. I was definitely a tourist on that excursion.
Mm. There's a very good YouTube video out at the moment where there's a geese on that Charles Bridge in Prague. Have you seen that online?
I don't think so. I'll have to look that
Yeah,
up.
it's a funny one because there's about 4 or 5 police officers trying to get this geese off the bridge and
Oh,
they don't know
jeez.
how to do it. Yeah, so
Oh, my.
check that out. It's a lot of fun, that one.
I definitely will have to watch that.
Now, Cinque Terre, that's one of my favorite spots. I used to go down there a lot and do a lot of cycling because it's a very hilly area along
Oh,
there.
Yes.
did you get on a push bike when you're in that area and get around, or
I did not.
no?
At that point, I had enough physical activity from walking everywhere. So it was good to just lay on the beaches and eat some authentic Italian cuisine.
Fantastic. So after you did that trip, obviously it increased your appetite for more travel and that. But what are some of the things that came out of it in terms of your understanding of other cultures and seeing people in their own countries for the first time of traveling outside of America? What were some of the features that really stuck with you from that trip?
Um, well, the biggest thing, part of our study abroad thing was that we compared the United States to what we were seeing in Europe. So that was really cool being able to compare and contrast
Mm,
to what we thought worked in the United States versus like what is actually really working in Europe. So there was some things that really struck me at first. Some of them being that you had to pay for water. I think that was like the most insane thing that we had all thought of. But like deeper down, it makes sense because, they're trying to be environmentally aware and thinking of these things. So those type of things really got to a lot of us, or like paying for bathrooms. That was very strange, but
mm,
there's a reason why they do it based off of their history and
yep.
such like that.
Yeah, right.
So I definitely have like more appreciation for how people do things, whereas in the past I'd probably just look at it and go, "Oh, that's strange." Whereas like I can appreciate it now, like, "Oh, this is why they've done these things because of X, Y, and Z." So I think it's pretty cool.
There must have been a lot of eye-opening moments from somebody from Balsam Lake who were venturing to some of these amazing places in Europe.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Probably the biggest one too was just public transportation, because that is not a thing in small town Balsam Lake, because you can walk from one end of the city to the other.
Yep.
But that was probably the coolest thing too, just how their railways and metro systems work and how smooth they run.
Mm, mm, fantastic. Look, we're going to be talking today about being an au pair, and I think this is a really exciting subject because we are a travel channel and a travel podcast show. And I would get really excited interviewing people that are traveling around the world for all kinds of different reasons. And we've had people that have climbed some of the tallest mountains in the world on the show. We've had people that have actually kayaked around Antarctica. And now we've got someone that's traveled to the other side of the world to look after somebody else's children. And I find that quite fascinating. So tell us how this whole thing of being an au pair actually started for you back in Balsam Lake.
Yeah, so one of my older friends actually had become an au pair. A couple years ago, she did it in Spain.
Mm,
And I honestly had never thought anything of it until after I got bit by that bug to travel. And then I graduated college, and I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. So I graduated with a degree in communication studies.
hmm
So with that, you can go really any route, but I'm only 22, so I wasn't exactly wanting to get a big girl job yet or like really settle down.
mm,
So she had mentioned something about aupairworld.com.
right.
So families can put out their profile, kind of put out their expectations, what they're looking for, and then au pairs can put out theirs, tell a little bit about themselves, things like that.
Mm,
So that's kind of like where it all started. And I didn't really understand like how fast things could get moving. I think I started getting on that website about April and had gotten this job by July. So
wow.
yeah, it was pretty surreal and looking back at it.
Mm. So tell us about the process. So you go onto this website and what do you have to provide as far as information? Do you have to have any previous experience of being an au pair, or how does it work?
It really depends on what the family is looking for. Some families do expect to have somebody with previous experience. Basically, if you have any experience with children, you're able to get on this website. you might not get every family that you want if you don't have the au pair experience. But I didn't have any experience with being an au pair before this. I had babysat and like taken care of children before, so I had that background, but hadn't been an au pair. So it's still possible for really anyone to get a job. But once you set up your profile, you can kind of narrow in what countries you want to possibly be an au pair in. So Australia and Spain were my top two, because those are kind of two places I'd love to go.
Do you speak Spanish?
Very little.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of experience that and maybe even learn some Spanish while I did it. But I figured Spain would have been too much of a culture shock. And at least going to Australia, we all speak English, so that helps a little bit.
Well, kind of.
Yes, very kind of.
I was going to ask you today, actually, if you actually understood most of the Australian accents.
A little bit. Some of them are very thick and hard to get, but and the sayings too, like lollies and very different.
We'll get onto some of the slangs a bit later. I think that'll be quite funny.
Oh gosh,
So the process was quite fast then. How was I can only imagine your mother was getting very nervous at this stage, thinking about she was going to lose a daughter to the other side of the world. How did that all go down with the family? With you announcing that first of all you wanted to be an au pair, and secondly you got this opportunity very quickly in the process.
Yeah. Well, I had talked to them about it and had thought about doing this traveling stuff. And my mom actually, the funny thing is, before she met my dad, she wanted to do an internship in New Zealand. And then she ended up falling in love and never went. So my mom was 100% on board, let's go kind of thing. My dad is very, he kind of keeps to himself, but he's not really emotional about certain things. So he was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, do what you got to do kind of thing. But they're both basically said, as long as it's like a real thing and it's not like you're moving across the world to end up not having a family or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were very on board and very supportive in my decision. I had many talks with them about it, and they both agreed that this was something I should do while I'm young and while I don't really have anything holding me back. So
fantastic.
Very supportive.
Now, I have a message for your mother, and this is said with all due respect, is that from a particular New Zealander, of which I am, she has to get out there at some stage in her life and experience my wonderful country, because and maybe it's a great time to do that while you're down here, so you can go and do it together, actually.
Yeah, she is actually coming after Christmas with her sister, so my aunt, and they're coming for 10 days to visit down here. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I bet that'll be fantastic. How did your brother take the news that you were going to leave home and shoot off to the other side of the world?
He was actually really excited for me. I think my brother would enjoy doing traveling opportunities like this. He actually has Asperger's, so he doesn't, he's not very social in that sense, or like really going out and doing these things.
Yep.
But he was very excited to learn about what I'll be doing and what I'll be seeing, and kind of jealous in a sense that I'll get to see some of the things down here.
Well, I'm sure you're sharing lots of your experiences with him online, and he's been able to see a lot of the stuff that you've been doing in Australia since you've been here. Yeah,
he's enjoyed it. He really wants video of me in the Great Barrier Reef when I go at some point. So.
Okay, well that's a good goal to have as well. Now tell us about the connection with the family that you end up getting hooked up with. How does that work in terms of, do you have a lot of Skype calls when you first meet them and say hello to each other? How does that part of the process work?
So after you've created like your profile and such, you can start messaging families, and as you're scrolling through, you can send them a message or favorite them. So at first I was kind of very picky on what I wanted. Just because I wasn't really sure what the au pair life was going to entail. So I kind of had really set standards of how old I wanted the kids, what I wanted my working hours to be, stuff like that. And I wasn't really getting any messages back. So then I started like broadening my horizons and opening it up a little bit more, and started getting a lot more messages back from families.
Mm.
So this family that I'm currently with, they had responded and said that they would love to set up a Skype interview. So we set that up, and it was just me with the mom and the dad on a Skype call. So they just asked kind of formal questions like, how well do you get along with people? What are your experiences with children? For this specific job, I would have to drive. So they wanted to know how long I've had my driving license and if I've had any speeding tickets or anything like that,
Mm.
that would turn them away from me.
Mm.
But just after talking with them, telling them a little bit about myself, it was probably like an hour and a half long interview of just getting to know each other and sharing brief stories and kind of connecting on that level.
Mm.
And then they had messaged me back within minutes after ending the Skype call saying, that they really liked me and would love me to get the opportunity to meet the kids. So then
Brilliant.
we set up another Skype call, and then the kids were on, so I got to interact with them a little bit and talk to them and find out what they like to do and see how we interacted with that as well. So,
I was gonna say about that last bit about your credentials. That I was gonna say that nobody from Balsam Lake's probably ever had a speeding fine, so you didn't have a blemish on your driving record, I'm sure.
well, I actually had a speeding ticket when I was young, like
Oh,
17 years old. So,
oh,
but that was just a minor hiccup in my youth, as I like to say.
it's probably your uncle was a policeman in Balsam Lake, is that right?
Yeah, just about.
Okay, so you've got to meet the family and the children.
Yes.
How old are the children you're looking after?
So they're kind of non-typical, but they are 12 and 14.
Okay.
So most au pairs are usually taking care of like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds,
Mm.
usually younger kids.
Mm.
So it was a little bit different, but I think that's also what appealed to me because I did like not the babysitting aspect and more of an older sister approach.
This is more like almost drinking buddy age, these guys.
I mean, just about. It's not Germany though. So,
So let's go back to the day that you left Minneapolis and flew out to Australia. How were the nerves around this
oh,
whole experience of, flying, first of all, halfway across the world, and secondly, going to a brand new family home to do this job? What were some of the things you were thinking about on that plane ride?
oh my gosh. I am not gonna lie. I was the biggest nervous wreck getting out of the car because my family had walked me in to drop off my bags and such. And when it came time to say goodbye, oh my gosh, we all just cried. I have only seen my dad cry like 3 times in my life, and
Mm.
this was one of them
Mm.
actually.
Mm.
So that was very different. But I was very nervous. I'm not gonna lie. Like I have had anxiety kind of my whole life, so I was very nervous about that.
Yep.
But once I got on the first plane, because I had to fly to Los Angeles,
Right.
once I got to Los Angeles and got a chance to like sit down, eat, relax a little bit before the big long haul flight, I was good. I was pretty excited for it. And then once I was actually on the plane, it was pretty good. I was pretty excited
Mm.
until like maybe an hour out of Sydney. I started to realize, holy buckets, I am going to Australia. Like, whew, not gonna lie, I was pretty emotional. So I was just kind of walking about the cabin thinking about it, like, wow,
Yeah.
you just moved across the country.
Across the world.
Yeah, oh yeah, across the world. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been the longest flight you've ever been on in your life so far.
Yes, the
So
longest for sure, because that was about 14 hours from Los Angeles.
so how were you when you arrived? How did you feel when you actually got off that plane, and what were some of your first sensory observations of being in Australia at Sydney Airport?
Well, this from the second I could see cars, I was shocked because I forgot they drive on the other side of the road. So I'm like, why are the cars going the wrong way? And at that point, I was pretty tired, so I was just a little confused.
Mm, mm,
But I definitely was ready for a shower after that.
I bet.
But it was very different because getting off the plane in the international terminal was, you have so many different people, so many different passports from so many countries, and it was all kind of overwhelming. You know, they tell you to scan your passport here and go there, and I was
Mm.
just kind of following the crowd, looking lost. But there was a family that I had actually met on my first flight to Los Angeles that was going to Sydney. So I kind of found them and they kind of helped me along and were like my airport parents, as I like to call them.
Mm.
So that was nice to have.
Was your whole host family there upon arrival?
So the kids actually started school that day again.
Mm.
So they were not there, but the mom and the dad were there to pick me up. So it was very different actually getting to see them in person versus on a computer screen. So it was really cool, and we walked over to where they were parked and stuff. And you can't even like put into words like how you were feeling when all this is going, and with the jet lag. Oh gosh, it was it was definitely an experience to finally get to see them and meet them.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, and I'm sure in some respects, regardless of how excited you are, it must feel sort of overwhelming to think that you've traveled across the world. You're doing a job where you've actually got responsibility for other people, and you've never, in your case, you hadn't done this before, so it was a whole new experience. And doing that inside a different culture must have also been a bit of a shock to the system as well.
Yes, for sure.
Mm,
Just thinking about that, yeah,
mm,
realizing what the next 6 months were going to entail, and because I hadn't known too much about the details of what I would be doing when I was actually here. So I guess it was pretty overwhelming the first couple days, realizing like, okay, this is how everything works, and like the routine of things, as
mm.
well as, the culture shock of not being in the United States anymore.
So using hindsight as a observation tool, I guess in terms of that whole preparation process, how well was that thought out in terms of you being able to arrive and right down to what side of the road we drive on and all the rest of it? Could that have been done any better, do you think, to make the transition easier for you, looking back on it now, or do you think it was a pretty good process of induction for you?
I think there's always things to improve on when you're trying to work out these details, but at the same time, I think it was good the way it was, because if I would have known too much, then I probably would have started to overthink it or really start to kind of blow it out of proportion. Whereas not really knowing too much was kind of good for me to just kind of focus on getting to Australia and focus on keeping it together on the plane. So that was kind of nice. It didn't take too long to learn everything and get situated. So
Mm.
it it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, getting transitioned.
So being thrown in at the deep end is okay sometimes.
Yes, sometimes it's actually pretty healthy to do it.
Mm. Just like going on a podcast show without knowing the questions that are coming.
Exactly. Spontaneous.
So here's one for you. I'll throw one at you right now. What's your favorite snack food when you're traveling?
When I'm traveling, ooh, that's tough. Um, this time at least, it was like a trail mix type thing. That was
Oh yeah,
perfect. Just sweet and salty at the same time, but
yeah.
it wasn't like enough to really fill you up or feel bloated or gross while you're on the plane. But
Mm.
that was probably my favorite thing to have during this traveling.
I ask all my guests that question, and I've got a little whiteboard going on in my studio here, so I'm going to write down trail mix because it's the first time anybody said trail mix. So you're the only one that's said trail
Oh
mix
wow!
so far.
But it has to have the little M&Ms in it, because that's the true trail mix.
That's cheating. That's almost on verging on chocolate.
Well, there's not a lot of them, so it's okay.
That's okay. Now, this whole au pair experience is, I guess, very different by every family unit because,
Yes.
as we said already, the age of the children is one thing. I guess also whether a family has animals and pets and things is another thing. Depending on the situation between the parents, whether they're working both or one is or the other isn't or whatever's going on. So I guess the dynamics of this whole job description can be very varied across every situation. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. In my experiences with other au pairs so far, just listening to what their duties are and like what their days are, very different all across the board. Because each family is unique and has so many different needs. So it's very different depending on which family you pick.
I was going to ask you about that. Is it a tight knit network of au pairs that get together? Do you go out with other girls and guys in Sydney that are au pairs, and is there a mixture of boys and girls? Or is it mainly girls that take on this role?
I think so far I've met mostly female au pairs, but they do have male ones out there. They call themselves bro pairs.
Bro pairs.
But I haven't met any yet, but I know they're out there. I've seen a few of them on a couple Facebook groups. So there's numerous Facebook groups called like Sydney Au Pairs or Au Pairs in Sydney. So a
Mm.
lot of people are on those group pages asking for, hey, if anyone wants to go out to lunch or go out, have a drink, anything like that. So it's pretty accessible to find people. It's just finding the motivation to actually go out and commit to going to lunch or things like that so far.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and that's obviously how I found you on one of those sites.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of it's a great way to share something that you've got in common with
Yes.
and someone who understands what you're doing as well. Like if they're in your shoes, then they can show a bit of empathy towards some of the highlights as well as the lowlights, I guess, as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm,
I've actually
mm,
met a couple au pairs. So the last 2 weekends, I've been doing these day trips through a travel company called Aussie Day Trips. So we
uh-huh.
went to, yesterday went to Port Stevens, and the weekend before I went to Jarvis Bay. So I've gotten a chance to meet and connect with a lot of au pairs
Mm.
through that. So they're from Sweden and Norway, Germany. There was a few from Brazil. So it's really cool to kind of get to all connect in that sense through just a simple day trip.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you like the amazing color of the water at Jarvis Bay?
Oh my gosh, it was completely gorgeous compared to, the muddy, murky water we have back home.
Yeah,
It was absolutely gorgeous.
it's beautiful down there. It's a lovely part of the world.
Yes.
So getting back to the job itself, you arrived on the first day, and the kids were at school. What happened when they came home, and how was that experience and interaction for the first time?
It was good. We went and picked them up from school. So I went with after I'd napped and showered and actually looked presentable. But they came out of school and they both gave me really big hugs and were excited to see me. And I'd really only talked to them the 1 or 2 times through Skype. So I was kind of shocked by that, just how affectionate they were right off from the bat and very talkative.
Mm.
And the second we got home, they had to show me everything, show me their rooms, every little thing, and pictures of them, and just everything and anything in the house, which was really cool because it made me fit right in and I felt really welcome right from the start.
Is it a boy and girl scenario?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. The
Okay.
14-year-old is a girl, and then the 12-year-old is the boy.
So was the 12-year-old boy trying to get the most of your attention?
Of course. He was very excited. He's always very energetic, so he had to show me his Rubik's cubes, his Doctor Who stuff, like everything. So it was pretty cool.
I bet you he was running to school telling all his mates that he's got an American chick at his house and everything's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I am their first American, so it's been an experience for them too.
Well, that's another interesting thing as well. So is this particular family, they've had au pairs before?
Yes, so they've had au pairs for about 5 or 6 years, so they're pretty used to having
Mm,
somebody else in their household helping out.
mm. How does that feel for you in terms of, is there some kind of, um, indirect pressure of living up to somebody else's expectations of someone that's gone before you with these kids, or what?
I would say so. I think the au pair before me wasn't as great as she possibly could have been. So
Hmm.
that helps me in a little way. But yeah, when they talk about other au pairs, it does make you a little nervous. Like, am I doing everything to the best of my ability? Am I exceeding their expectations?
Mm.
But I'm not worried about that too much because, like, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, and they've said that I do quite a bit as an au pair. So that's
Mm.
always good to hear that.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, prior to arriving in Australia and taking up the position, did you actually get photographs or videos of the space that you're going to be staying in? So, did you see the bedroom and everything where you would be actually living?
Actually, no, I did not. The
Mm.
only really big thing that I had seen was the view off of their balcony and then like the background of the Skype call. So I really hadn't known what I was going to walk into when I first walked into the house.
Mm.
So, my imagination was definitely running wild at first because you picture what it's going to look like based on what you know, but it was very different.
Yeah. Which part of Sydney are you in?
I am out in Abbotsford, so the
West.
northwestern suburbs.
Yeah, okay. And did you find Sydney to be such a huge, sprawling city? Like, had you been to a place as big as that before?
Not really. I mean, the biggest city I've probably ever been to was New York and Los Angeles, but hadn't spent as much time in those cities as I wanted to. So it was definitely an experience when we were driving home from the airport and seeing so much stuff, and it felt like it just kept going on and on and on forever of these buildings and businesses and houses, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very cool.
Now you talked about the time frame of your, let's say, contract. Is this a standard thing, or do they change by the whatever relationship you have with the family? So how long are you in this particular role for?
So I will be here for 6 months, so about mid-April.
Hmm.
So it can really vary by families. Some people are only looking for somebody maybe for a couple months. And there are some other families that are looking for an au pair to be with them for almost 1 or 2 years.
Mm.
So it really just depends. Originally, when I had started talking to this family, I was only going to be with them from October to Christmas,
Yeah.
but that's only one term for the kids.
Mm.
So we had talked about doing 2 terms. So they'll have this school, then they'll have holiday, and then they'll go back to school. And when they're done around Easter, that's when I will technically be officially done.
Mm. Okay,
So
good. So we've probably got people listening to the show who are sitting on both sides of the fence. They might be a family that's interested in getting a au pair, and I've got to tell you something funny actually. When I posted the message up on the au pair Facebook page where I found you, I actually got contacted by about 5 different family members
oh, wow.
of parents who wanted to be on the show as well,
Oh, that's cool.
talking about their experiences with au pairs from around the world. So I will do something on that later on, but I thought that was quite interesting
Yeah, that's
actually
very cool.
to have them contact me. So the terms, I guess, of the arrangements, they vary by the different families' requirements. Is this something that you'd like to do again? Is it something that's already whet your appetite for more of this around the world?
Well, I definitely think I could see myself doing this again. It would really depend on what it's like when I'm done. Just because I'm really enjoying my time here so far, and I wouldn't want like another experience that wouldn't be as good to ruin my thought of an au pair, or kind of my spokesmanship of being an au pair kind of thing. So
Mm, mm.
I really like this family, so I don't know if I would be able to find another family that lives up to kind of the expectations that I've had here, and
Mm.
the hospitality. I'm sure they are out there, but it'll also just depend on what life brings come April.
Yeah,
But
I was gonna ask you about that in terms of you mentioned earlier in the show that you hadn't really had too many ideas about what you wanted to do with your career path, and that has any of that evolved anyway since you've been in Australia? Have you got any ideas yet on the ways that you want to use the skill sets, but also looking at full time jobs in the business world, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I kind of have two different routes, which are completely different from each other. The first route would be kind of going into political communication,
Yep.
but I have no clue really what that would entail or what it would be like. But my second route, which I'm leaning a little bit more towards, would be somewhere in the entertainment industry. So whether working for a theater company or a specific theater or, even the Sydney Opera House,
Mm,
something
mm,
like that would be really cool to me. Which before I had left for Australia, that was kind of in the back of my mind. But while I'm here, it seems like there are so many cool people to network with.
mhm.
So that's kind of been my main focus, not thinking about any full time positions when I get back, kind of just seeing who I can meet because I mean, I'm a firm believer on it's who you know and not what you know.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
just being able to talk with so many people and having conversations with people from all around the world has been the coolest part.
Mm. What's the biggest differences between life in America and life in Australia for you?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is, and it's kind of strange to me, but afternoon tea. That's very weird to me. Like, we don't have that really back home.
Mm,
Or I would say we're not super big tea drinkers. I
mm,
mean, I'm not really speaking for everyone in the States, but
mm.
I like was offered tea right away and I'm like, I don't, okay, sure, I'll take some. But that's kind of been different. The the accents are very different,
Mm.
I would say, but it doesn't seem too different. I think Australia to me has more of a European feel. I thought it was going to be a little bit more similar to the States, but
Mm.
it's very different.
Mm. That's interesting you say that, because the impression that one has living in the country, and again, I'm a New Zealander, but I've been here a little bit. I get the impression that particularly kids around and people around your age have a very strong influence by the American system in general, like
Yes.
TV shows, movies, music, all the different arts, and that I think it seems to be strongly cultured by the American society.
Yes, based off of like the entertainment, I have noticed that
Mm,
like the Norwegians were listening to some American pop stars and singers, and that was different for me because I always forget like these are worldwide artists.
mm,
So that
yeah.
has been very different in the entertainment industry. Or like when we watch Netflix, there's a lot of shows from the US. And I
Mm.
guess I do forget about that, how ruled the United States is when it comes to movies and TV shows and music like that. So
I was going to say, if you're going to go down the path of a career in the political communications area, you probably want to wait until after the next US election before you go down that path.
oh gosh, yes, please. That day cannot come soon enough. Let me just say that.
We'll see what happens in that space. Yeah, we'll see
Well,
what happens.
hopefully he's gone. Let's I'll just throw that out there.
I could very easily turn this into a political show, but
oh
we'll keep
gosh.
on we'll keep on the track of being an au pair at this stage.
yes.
What are some of the challenges in your job, slash life, being an au pair in Australia, in terms of having your own time and space? Is that one of the challenges of the job?
It's in this family, I've been able to definitely find time for myself,
Mm,
which is really nice because when you are, halfway across the world, it's nice to kind of get away and just think about you and recharge.
yep.
So I do have my own bathroom and my own bedroom, which is awesome to get away. So that helps.
Have
As
you got a triple lock on the door to keep the kids out?
no, I mean the girl had been stealing some candy from my room, but
Oh,
I knew
oh.
about it, so it's okay.
You got to stop leaving those trail mixes laying around.
Yeah, seriously.
Mm, mm.
But no, they're pretty good about staying to their stuff and kind of giving me my personal space, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But probably the hardest part has been just trying to find that balance of getting out and exploring versus like recharging and taking time for yourself.
Mm.
Because I definitely don't want to like waste my time in Australia, and I want to see everything I can possibly see. So it's kind of hard for me to like just sit and relax and take time to maybe
Mm.
just watch a couple Netflix shows.
Mm.
So that's probably been the hardest part.
Yep.
But
And
I
what
think as we get further along, it'll be easier.
and what about the highlights? What are the things that have kind of jumped out and surprised you a little bit about taking on this kind of experience?
I think probably the biggest thing has been how welcoming it's been to be in this family. Like I don't feel like an awkward outsider, which is great.
Mm.
So I'd like that's always my biggest fear when you go into somebody's house. Like I always feel like I can't touch anything or do anything. So it's been really nice to kind of do my own thing and fit right in. And I'm sure that comes with them having au pairs for many years, so they're very used to it. So that's been very nice, very welcoming.
How do you think this experience is changing you as a person?
I think it's definitely making me be a lot more patient because you are working with children. So you have to learn from that, as well as just being able to experience a different culture has been huge as well. Because Australia is, like I said, not the States by any means. So that's probably been the coolest thing is getting to hear how, some of the things in the outback are going, watching the news here versus the news in the US.
Mm.
All of these things, just being able to take in such a different culture and a different viewpoint and seeing how like Australia views the States and vice versa, just everything has been such an experience, and I think it'll for sure change me when I do leave.
How have those observations been around some of those things that you just mentioned there about the differences when you look at Australian society versus the US? And if we talk about specifics like the homeless situation in Australia, the Indigenous situation in Australia, are there comparisons there to what's going on in the United States, or is one country further down the path than the other? How do you surmise that sort of stuff?
I would say that on paper they're not so similar, but when you look deeper down at these issues, they're very similar. I mean, Australia seems to be having that fight with Indigenous people and stuff like that, and as well as in the United States, there's this constant battle back and forth between what's right and what works and stuff like that. So I've noticed that a lot, as well as like just key areas such as like gay marriage and things like that in the United States. It is legal in the States, but there's still a lot of backlash from certain individuals and people.
Mm.
And I think both sides seem to have their perks, but they also have their deep-seated issues. And that's been very interesting to kind of see how different they are, but very similar.
What about on something like climate change and it's a pretty hot topic, excuse the pun, at the moment around the world. But do you see Australia being more prevalent and proactive in that space, or less proactive and prevalent than what's happening in the United States?
I personally think Australia is a lot more proactive with it because being that you guys are surrounded by water, I mean, we kind of are too, but you're your own little island, and it's kind of a big thing. And in the States, I feel like a lot of us are denying it and just not really thinking about it. I know people back in Wisconsin, their main thought are, well, the oceans aren't near us, so why
Mm.
does it
Mm.
matter? Which is definitely not the mindset to have by any means.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say Australia is a little bit better off when it comes to that because, you kind of have to be aware of everything that's going on. And I really like that personally, because I don't really hear about the denial of it. People know it's happening and know we need to do something here. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, good. So I guess in terms of another curveball question I have for you, what are a couple of things that you put in your suitcase to bring out to Australia that you couldn't leave behind in Balsam Lake?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Trying to think. Well, I brought 2 little stuffed alpacas, which is kind of very out there, but I got them from my goddaughter a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So they kind of mean something to me, and we actually just got alpacas back home right before I left. So it was just kind of a little thing to commemorate them and my goddaughter in the same way.
That's cool.
As well as my journal, which I keep a lot of lists in. So I have a running list of everything I want to do ever. So it basically comes from getting married to skydiving to everything that I want to achieve. So those were some top items I had to bring and knew I needed them when I went on this adventure.
So other than your family, what's the thing you miss most about home?
Of course, my animals. So I kind of live on like a funny farm, as I like to call it back home.
Funny farm.
Yes, my mom hates when I call it that, but it's like a little hobby farm. So we have miniature horses, dogs, bunnies, cats, chickens. So I kind of miss that stuff, and just being able to go outside and see them and visit with them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's 6 months is a short time, so I'll be with them soon enough.
You'll be there for sure, yeah.
Exactly.
Listen, Leslie Rose Petersen, it's been very fast our time together today, and it's been wonderful to hear you talking about being an au pair in beautiful Sydney, Australia. So I want to thank you very much for coming on the show, all the way from Balsam Lake there up in northern Minnesota. It's a fantastic part of the world up there, and I suggest to anybody listening to the show today, put it on your bucket list and get up there. Make sure you go in the summertime though, because it can be a little bit harsh on the soles of your feet and the fingertips of your fingers if you're going up there in the middle of winter. But it's been lovely having you on the show today. Have you enjoyed your first podcast experience?
Yes, it was really cool getting to share a little bit about what I've experienced, and I just want to say thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm going to lay down a challenge to you today before I let you go. And that challenge is going to be, I'd love you to keep in touch with me, because once you've done this experience and you head off somewhere else in the world, I'd like to have you back on the show again so we can follow your journey a little bit and find out where you go to next. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so write that down in your journal as
one
of the things that you need to do. And look, if the communications degree that you've got, you can always start up your own podcast show one day.
That is true. Travel the world just like you.
There you go. Leslie, thanks very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and good luck with the rest of your time in Sydney, Australia.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
There we are. That was Leslie Rose Petersen talking to us from Sydney in Australia, where she is currently an au pair for a family in Australia. She's all the way from Balsam Lake in Wisconsin, United States of America. A lovely young lady. Leslie, you're welcome back on the show anytime you would like. Now, if you're looking for more episodes of the Global Travel Channel podcast series, you can head on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. It's as easy as that, and you'll find there a whole host of our podcast shows. If you like our content, don't forget to share them with your friends, family, and work colleagues. We're trying to grow our global community as much as we can. You'll also find on our website the locations where you can go to download each episode, such as Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and a host of other locations that are all listed there on our website. Okay, that's it for me for this particular episode. I look forward to the next time when I can produce another show and share it with you all around the world. My name is Mark Philpott, and until next time, I wish you all bon voyage.